Great to meet you. And I'm with Pandora. I'm the Vice President of Monetization and Yield at Pandora. So it's my job to manage Pandora's assets, manage our inventory assets and manage our audience assets and make sure we're getting the most value out of those. And a key piece of that, as Tom pointed out, is forecasting, is our ability to understand what we have to sell where. So just a little bit about Pandora's business. We're the largest radio station in virtually every market in the United States. And in addition to selling digital products, display, video that you would all recognize, and even in addition to selling audio into digital buyers, which looks a lot like selling display, we also sell radio. We sell something that looks very much like a local radio station to, Bob's Buick GMC dealer in Sheboygan. And in order to do that, we've got to understand how much inventory do we have available at any one point in time. If we get that wrong, if we get it wrong high, if our estimate of how much we have available is wrong high, we'll oversell, and we'll be in a situation where we underdeliver, and we have to make that client happy. And that can cost money, and it can create customer relationship problems. If we miss low, then we'll undersell. And so we'll have a seller in the market that might have been able to get a $10,000 deal, a $50,000 deal, but in fact went in at 5 or 30 because they thought that was the maximum that they could achieve. And so forecasting is absolutely critical to us to drive revenue and to get that and to maximize that revenue. And so we've been working with YieldX for about 5 years now?
5 years.
About 5 years now. We also work with Google. We're a double-click ad-serving client. And so we see the forecasts from both DoubleClick and the AppNexus YieldX platform. And we've recognized over the years that the DoubleClick forecast, and I'm sure those of you that are publishers have experience with this, is not terribly accurate, particularly as you get into smaller and smaller targets. So again, we're selling, perhaps women, let's say 18 to 24 in Portland. That's a pretty small target compared to, women nationally or women 25 to 54 nationally. And the accuracy of that target is critical to us. And so but we recognize that DFP doesn't always bring us that accurate forecast. And even when they do bring us a forecast, it's not even terribly stable in those smaller targets. So we decided we wanted to do a head-to-head competition look at how big were those discrepancies? How big was the problem we were experiencing with the DoubleClick forecast? And we teamed up with Tom's team here, and they did a great job over about a month. And what we did was we took about 134 of our kind of selling targets, everything from fairly big national targets down to, those women 18 to 24 in Portland, which is starting to get pretty small. And we looked at the forecast over 3 periods of time in September. So we looked at it the first week of September, what do we think we're going to have in the last week? We looked at it the second week of September, what are we going to have in the last week? We looked at it the third week of September, what are we going to have in the last week? And we looked at both capacity and we looked at the estimate of delivery. And we compared, and then we got to the last week of September, and we pulled the actual data, and we compared what was the forecast, what was the actual capacity, and how was that inventory actually used, what actually delivered. And the results were a little shocking. So the numbers you see up there are the average error, or the average accuracy, I guess, across all those different targets. But the way I think about it is a little more product by product. So the important number for me, if you look at this distribution, and what you're looking at here, not to get too technical, too geeky for a minute, is the distribution of how many of the targets that we looked at were, say in that first bar, 90 to 100% accurate. How many were 80 to 89% accurate? And you can see the YieldX forecast versus the DoubleClick forecast. And what you see is for YieldX, on a capacity perspective, so this is how many impressions are we going to have, and I'll back up for just a second. Pandora's business is a little easy, actually, to forecast from a capacity perspective because it's pretty steady. We're not affected by news events. We're not affected by movie launches. We're fairly steady. People's listening behavior is fairly steady until you get to the holiday season, and then we take a pretty good bump. But so you would think that capacity would be relatively easy to forecast, and I apologize, Tom, but you guys, this part is a layup, right? But it's not a layup for Google for some reason. So if you look at this, YieldX is 80% or more accurate 95% of the time on forecasting capacity. Google is 80% or more accurate less than 50% of the time. So less than half the time do I get a forecast that's something I would actually, of capacity, and again, this is the easy part, that I would consider reasonably accurate. Now, shifting gears to delivery, so this is the key bit to get to actually what do I have available, right? So I've got to know what's my total capacity. I've got to subtract how the ad server is actually going to consume that capacity, given all the deals I have in the system. Given that, so this is the key bit to actually get me to what do I have to sell and what's that right number. And here the distinction gets even worse, right? So YieldX is 80% or more accurate. And by the way, sorry to be bouncing around, but by the way, this avails bit is the hard part, right? You've really got to understand how the ad server is going to consume the inventory, which campaigns are going to get fed, which are going to get starved. And you would think Google might understand how the ad server works. It's kind of their tool. But they don't seem very good at forecasting it. So the key numbers here are, that in that 80% or more accurate range, YieldX hits that mark 75% of the time. Google hits it 21% of the time. So the actual number I care about, which is avails and what do I have to sell, is only right if we use 80% or better accuracy, 21% of the time. That's a problem for us. So in sort of wrap up, I think everyone has sort of an intuitive sense of the importance of understanding your avails when you're out in the market. For us, it's even more important because of that granular local business that we run. And the core, our core tool for doing that historically has been, we've worked with both YieldX and DoubleClick on this, but our core tool's been DoubleClick, and it's clearly not adequate to the task.
Wow. Holy smokes, that was terrific. Thank you. Great. Let me just add, so let me get this straight. The punchline here is 95%, so that would be, like if you go back to grade school, that's an A.
You would think.
And 68% is like a D, right? So just to give you kind of a sense of this. So terrific.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Dave. Really
Thanks a lot,
appreciate
Tom.